be the food that we are to take part in and eat and enjoy together in community. When I think of this, I think, we make it stale. Sometimes we just make this wonderful living bread that is Jesus in the word stale. And none of us should do that as leaders. I've been guilty of it. You get into patterns, you get into habits, you do things, and you realize you're just kind of going around the circle, kind of using the book in a way that's not exciting. And what I want to give us is some guidelines today to engage the text, and then some approaches or practices to help us bring some creativity to how we use the text. Guideline number 1, study the Bible for yourself, but don't study the Bible by yourself. That may seem obvious, it's kind of one of my mantras, but to study the Bible for yourself means, yes, you have the tools, you have the ability to open this book, read it when you do your study and engage with it. But a lot of people say, hey, it's just me and my Bible and the Holy Spirit. No. We study the Bible in community together. And this is a point. I don't mean we study the Bible individually, then we come discuss it in community. That's okay. We study it as a community. We do the study in the circle. We open the text and we engage it. We study the Bible not just for ourselves, but not just by ourselves. We want to do it with others in community. Acts 2:42 shows what the early church did with this principle. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They devoted themselves. That has a Hebrew background, that word. To devote something to a Hebrew meant to fully give it over. The devoted things of the Old Testament were sacrificed and burned up. They were gone. These people gave themselves totally to the apostles' teaching in community. A second guideline would be never engage the text without encountering the author. Encounter the author. The religious elite of Jesus' day, the Bible study experts, they lacked something. John 5:39 tells us what they lacked. Jesus spoke to these religious elite and said, "You diligently study the scriptures because you think that by them you possess eternal life. These are the scriptures that testify about me, yet you refuse to come to me and have life." You can go to the Word and you cannot meet the author. My daughter, when she was about 10 years old, got a call from a babysitter from a few years earlier. Becca called her on the phone and said, "Hey, would you like to go to a concert with me?" I said, "Sure." Who's performing?" I said, "Well, there were some girls. They grew up at Willow Creek. They've cut a few CDs. They're starting to emerge as a pretty prominent band. They're called Barlow Girl. And if you'd like, I'd love to take you to the concert." Kinsley says, "This is great. That'd be fun." Picks her up, takes her to the concert. They go to the concert. They have a great time. They come back. Kinsley walks into the house. I say, "How was the concert?" She said, "It was good." I said, "Oh, yeah. You sure? I mean, it was good." "Oh, yeah, music was great." She kind of walked like this. Did something else happen at the concert? See, I knew what happened at the concert. She didn't know that I knew. See, Becca is the personal assistant for Barlow Girl. She organizes everything. She gave her backstage passes. She hung with the group. So here's what she says to me. "Yeah, it was good. Kind of chilled with the group backstage." I said, "You did what?" She goes, "Yeah, just kind of chilled out, hung out with Barlow Girl." It was one of those. I said, "Really?" And then she got excited. She goes, "Oh, Dad, it was awesome." And she pulls out all these photos, and she had digital camera stuff. We loaded it, and we looked at it, and here she is all excited. There's a big difference between just engaging the content and meeting the author, hearing the music and meeting the musician, looking at the painting and meeting the artist. There's something special about that. Now, we don't need a backstage pass to connect with God. We have the opportunity every day, every time we open this book to enter His presence. But sometimes we look at this and we get stuck in the text and we get caught up in the content and we miss engagement with the author. It can happen. It happened to the Pharisees. It can happen to us. A third guideline to me would be reading the Bible for transformation, not just information. We've been talking about transformation all day. But you read with a view toward change, not simply content. Because content's knowing about stuff versus knowing stuff. To know about stuff creates pride and makes us want to control and defines things or makes us want to correct others when we have a body of knowledge. Versus to know something, like to know God doesn't create pride. To know Him creates humility in me. To know God makes me feel freedom in Him. To know God doesn't define God, it reveals God. To know God doesn't make me want to correct others, but rather to surrender myself to Him. We have an obsession with information. We have a tendency and a bent toward content and knowledge. So Parker Palmer says we tend to use knowledge in two ways. We pursue knowledge to pique our curiosity, We're insatiable knowledge people. We love to be curious. So we spend all this time on the internet and information sort of opportunities, just getting more and more and more because it piques our curiosity. He said another way we use knowledge is to gain control. You know the familiar saying, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And we use it to manipulate and control people. He says, no, instead we should use knowledge for something different. We should use knowledge to provoke compassion. To provoke compassion. When we find knowledge, when we find new information, it should move us to serve and to love and to reach out to people that we know, people who need that truth. That's what keeps the word fresh. We start living around these principles and guidelines. It keeps the word fresh. Now, I want to talk about 3 approaches that take these guidelines and sort of put hands and feet on. But first, I just got to say something here that I see in groups that I fear corrupts them, if you will. And I want to warn you about something because something dangerous is happening in certain groups. And it's about how the Bible is used. And though we're not expected to be Bible experts, teachers, or scholars, we need diligence and humility with the Word. But there's a couple ways we can misuse the Bible. We can look at the Bible in sort of a careless, nonchalant sort of way. The result of that is something I call biblical malpractice. It's just biblical malpractice to just take the word tritely or lightly. It happens when we ignore tension in the text and try to make everything fit in a nice little box for ourselves. It happens when we skim over the familiar. Familiarity, they say, breeds contempt. You know what it's like? You're reading a passage and it's, oh yeah, here we are in John. Oh yeah, the feeding of the 5,000. I know, guys get fed. There's 12 baskets left over, yada, yada, yada. It happens sometimes. You kind of go, I know where the story's going. And again, we miss the author. We miss the engagement because it's so familiar with us. We trivialize it. I had a pastor who said to me, I've read these passages 1,000 times, and every time I meet Christ in a new way, I said, I want to be like that. Or we take it out of context. We just rip things out and use them for our own purposes. That's malpractice. But there's a second danger, something maybe more extreme. It kind of is at the other extreme, where the Bible is used for organizational power or personal gain. It happens when we use it to move people into maybe a political office or to justify our greed or our prosperity or to feel smarter than others. It's kind of used for intellectual power, economic power, or political power. We just kind of use the Bible in kind of a weapon sort of way. It's more important, in other words, for us to be right than to be righteous. I had some students sitting in a circle talking about the Bible together. They were discussing a passage. One of them responds to the text in this way, kind of shocked the group. Well, you know, those of us in the gay community, we read this differently. The other students pounced on her with Bible verses coming off the top of their heads on why she is wrong, why she's wrong to live that lifestyle, just all these kinds of things against her. They used the Bible as a weapon to beat her into submission. And it was a sad story to hear because I felt that's what happened. You see, when we use our physical strength to lord that over someone else, that's called physical abuse. When we compromise someone else's purity in a sexual way, that's sexual abuse, and we use that as a power weapon. When we use our tongue to demean people, we call that verbal abuse. When adults take advantage of children, that's child abuse. When we misuse this book and use it as a weapon, when we beat people up biblically and terrorize them with the truth, that's textual abuse. And it is not for God's community to ever engage in that. And I just, leaders, please don't let your groups drift into that use of the Bible as power or neglect of the Bible in a nonchalant way for biblical malpractice. So as you engage the text, be wary. Communities tend to drift. And that's why I think God gives us shepherd leaders like yourselves to help guide people through this process. Okay, so let's move into some practices, some approaches that will help us along the way. The first approach, I'll call it the read and reflect approach. This allows the Bible to sort of take root in us, to sit deep within us. Joshua 1:8 says this, don't let this book of the law depart from your mouth, but do what? You know the verse. But meditate on it. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous. Then you will be successful. Let me walk you a little bit through this method, and I'd like you and at our sites to just walk with me through this. I'm going to do a mini, short sort of practice of it, of a read and reflect sort of approach. So again, kind of run with me a little bit, if you will. There's sort of 4 movements to this that allows a group, again, to sort of slow down and let the words sink in. The first is to prepare your heart. Prepare your heart. When you're with a group, you know what it's like. They've just walked into the room. They've just come into the context. And they've come from work, or my group meets at 6:30 in the morning. They've just come from, the ozone layer. They come in, they're tired, they're looking for coffee. And we got to get hearts sort of prepared. And different ways can be used to prepare people's hearts to receive God's truth. It might be playing some music and letting them just listen to that. It might be this. It might be silence. Now, here's what I'd like to do with you. I know it'd be a stretch for some, and some of you at the sites, it may be a little bit of a stretch, but I'd like you to try it. I would like to take a couple of minutes in silence. Now, for those of you who are talkers, this is going to be hard. I did this with a group for the first time. I said, hey, we're just going to pause and have some time of silence. People in the room kind of did one of these things. We're like 30 seconds into it. It does feel a little awkward, but I want you to try something and just center your heart and pause in the quietness and listen to God. So I'm going to ask you, if you would like, close your eyes and just be quiet for a couple minutes.